Hare Krishna Gopta Kishore Prabhu, good to see you. Very well. You and your family. Okay. Recording's on. All right, so it's February 25th, 2024. We're here at Krishna's Cottage in Crosse, Florida, and the home ashram of Garuda and Damayanti Prabhus. This is a Bhakti Yoga Enlightenment Program, and we're going to study for the philosophy part of our program Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 2, contents of the Gita summarized, text 9. Text 9, chapter 2. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Krishna. So we'll start with the Sanskrit words responsively. Sanjaya. Sanjaya. Uvacha. Evam. Uktva. Rishikesham. Gudakesha. Parantapa. Na. Yotsya. Iti. Govinda. Uktva. Tushnim. Babuva. Sanjaya Uvacha. Evam Uktva Rishikesham. Gudakesha Parantapa. Nayotya iti Govindam. Uktva Tushnim Babuvaha. Sanjaya Uvacha. Evam Uktva Rishikesham. Gudakesha Parantapa. Nayotya iti Govindam. Uktva Tushnim Babuvaha. Sanjaya Uvacha. Evam Uktva Rishikesham. Gudakesha Parantapa. Nayotya iti Govindam. Vatushnim Babuvaha.
Sanjaya Uvacha.
Sanjaya Uvacha.
Evam Uktva Rishikesham.
Evam Uktva Rishikesham.
Gudakesha Parantapam.
Gudakesha Parantapa.
Nayotya iti Govindam.
Nayotya iti Govindam.
Uktva Tushnim Babuvaham.
Uktva Tushnim Babuvaha.
Sanjaya Uvacha.
Sanjaya Uvacha.
Rishikesham.
Evam Uktva Rishikesham.
Kesha Parantapa.
Gudakesha Parantapa.
Syati Govindam.
Nayotya iti Govindam.
Vatushnim Babuvaham.
Vatushnim Babuvaha. Would anyone else in person or online like to lead the chanting of the verse? Okay, we'll go to the word meanings. Sanjaya said, Evam, thus, Uktva, speaking, Rishikesham, unto Krishna, the master of the senses. Udakesha, Arjuna, the master at curbing ignorance. The chastiser of the enemies. Nayotye, I shall not fight. Iti, thus, Govindam, unto Krishna, the giver of pleasure. Ukta, saying, Tushnim, silent, Babuva, became, Ha, certainly. Translation. Sanjaya said, having spoken thus, Arjuna, chastiser of enemies, told Krishna, Govinda, I shall not fight, and fell silent. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Dhritarashtra must have been very glad to understand that Arjuna was not going to fight and was instead leaving the battlefield for the begging profession. But Sanjaya disappointed him again in relating that Arjuna was competent to kill his enemies, Parantapa. Although Arjuna was for the time being overwhelmed with false grief due to family affection, he surrendered unto Krishna, the supreme spiritual master, as a disciple. This indicated that he would soon be free from the false lamentation resulting from family affection and would be enlightened with perfect knowledge of self-realization or Krishna consciousness and would then surely fight. Thus, Dhritarashtra's joy would be frustrated since Arjuna would be enlightened by Krishna and would fight to the end. Hare Krishna. All right, so before continuing our talk and discussion, I'm going to recite a few more mantras to continue to invoke auspiciousness in our gathering and to ask for blessings from pure personalities, that whatever I say appropriately represents the spirit and substance of Bhagavad Gita and of Srila Prabhupada, who gave us Bhagavad Gita as it is. Om Jnanatirmirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Darati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Saganaraganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitan Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpata Yubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanan Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Sarasvati Deve Gauravani Pracharine. Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine. Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 2, text 9. Sanjaya Uvacha Evam Uktva Rishikesham Gudakesha Parantapa Nayotya Iti Govindam Uktva Tushnim Babuvaha. Sanjaya said, having spoken thus, Arjuna, chastiser of enemies, told Krishna, Govinda, I shall not fight, and fell silent. Hare Krishna. All right. So our title is something like Krishna Arjuna and conscious communication, like that. Yeah. All right. So we have we have a course. We mean like a Safetov Institute School of Transformative Coaching. We have a course we've been conducting at different times since about 15 years, since about 2008. And the course is called Bhagavad Gita, the source of transformative communication. Bhagavad Gita, yogic principles, and transformative coaching, different titles over different years. Okay, so well, one thing we can think of. So this is called an Enlightenment Program. So there could be the conception. There can be the conception of that. Well, once we achieve enlightenment, no more reason for communication. There could be that conception. When there's enlightenment, then maybe there could be conception that then we realize we're all one. And then, because actually the fact is, we can speak of like love and things like that. But actually, if we speak of love, it means there's two. Love means a voluntary exchange of service, of affection between two entities, So, actually, just the other day with Ramachandran Maina, we were talking about the analogy that Krishna and Prabhupada gave in the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, that Krishna talks about a tree with its branches down and its roots upward. So where do you have a tree which is with its branches down and roots up? Well, there is such a thing. If we're standing on the bank of a river or a lake, and there's big banyan tree on the other side, well, then the reflection in the water, the branches are down and the roots are up. Okay, so that's a metaphor for all of material and spiritual existence. So just like, yeah, and so it's quite a brilliant metaphor right there in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15. So just like if we go into the tree has fruits and we go into the reflection, we try to grab that mango or that fig, and there's no substance there. There's no substance there, right? So that relates how like attempts at substantial happiness in the material sphere. Material means alienated from self, alienated from our natural position as servants of the Supreme. So that's material consciousness. So then there's no substance there. And we can find many philosophers where they say, yes, like everything's an illusion, everything's empty, everything's ephemeral, and that's true. So Srila Prabhupada emphasizes that, yes, but that's just 180 degrees. He gives a geometry analogy. A circle has 360 degrees. So just the fact that there's a reflection, just the fact that there's a shadow, that means that there is something with substance, whether it's a shadow of a person or of a tree. A shadow means there's something with substance. A reflection means there's, so Prabhupada said, the other 180 degrees, that's the real tree. So there is a real tree with real fruits. Okay, so to take that out of with real fruits and real branches. So it's true in material existence. The relationships, communication, attempts at anything, color, personality. It's the shadow. That there is. So the Prabhupada would often say is once we come to true spiritual life, true connection with service to the divine, to God, then speaking and communication really begins because it takes on meaning, a related analogy, just like there's the desert. And so we can have an animal, could be a human animal, whatever, and the animal running in the desert, super hot, super hot. And there's 50 yards in the distance, there's a mirage. And we go, oh, but there's an oasis with water, but it goes 50 yards. Oh, but it's just a mirage. Oh, but 100 yards over there, there's water. Oh, it's just a mirage. And then eventually the animal dies in the heat. Mm-hmm. Dies because there's no water. But that's not true. There is water. There's just not water in the desert. So material life is compared to the desert. And then there is real water. There is a real banyan tree. There are real fruits. There is true joy and relationship and communication. And that's kind of our theme here. That's our theme here today. So, okay. We say a lot, like in our Safetov transformed communication programs, I'm not intrinsically interested in collecting just some communication tools. We're enthused about a communication-based approach to self-realization, a communication-based approach that truly supports us. It truly supports everyone in the communication. It supports the self to turn towards itself in self-realization, and the self to turn towards the absolute in an attitude of devotion. So we have this example here. This is a dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna. Now, this is like a transitional verse spoken by Sanjaya, and he's really paraphrasing what he's seeing through mystic television on the battlefield of Kurukshetra in the conversation between Arjuna and Krishna. All right. So, okay. Some of you have heard me tell the true story of Professor Gresset and Nimai. Okay. So Professor Gresset, actually he's writing a foreword for something I'm writing. And so I have a recent conversation with him. So this Gresset, also known as Mahasamya Das, he actually participated in the Safeto Foundational Advanced Seminars 15 years ago. And you might participate in like 20 years ago. So Gresset, he's like a PhD in Sanskrit. He's a professor. And at that time, actually, if you read Gresset's PhD dissertation from the University of Florida, there's a whole section on Sattva. Actually, it's in his dissertation. He talks about his experience. He talks about a communication-based approach to self-realization. So Gresset talks about his neighbor and friend named Nima. And they're living in a community where the residents are endeavoring to follow Bhagavad Gita. So Nimai said to Professor Gresset, Nimai said, the people in this community don't understand the first lesson of Bhagavad Gita. So Gresset was like, because generally the first lesson of Bhagavad Gita is seen to be really like the 20 verses that come after this one. It's 20 verses where Krishna is explaining the distinction between spirit and matter, between the soul and the body. Like there's the verse, Hinosmin yata dehe komaram yovinam jara, tata dehantara praptir diras tatra namuyati. As the embodied soul continually passes in this body from childhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at the time of death. It's like an empirical proof. A quick thought exercise we sometimes do. Imagine that you're looking at a photo of yourself when you were 5 years old. Okay? You're looking at a photo of yourself when you were 5. Clearly, there are some people in this room, they're not 5 yet. I understand. So it's like an exceptional situation. But if you're more than 5, imagine you're looking at a photo of yourself from when you were 5. Now, when you look at that photo, do you say, who is this stranger? Who is this person? No. So I say, oh, that's David when I was 5. You say, that's mine when I was 5. That's Devin. Now, we know from science, we know from chemistry, there's not one molecule, not one atom in the body now that was there at 5. Still, there's some constant identity that I call David, right? So that indicates that that identity is something completely non-physical. We can say, well, the body grew. Really, though, that's not true. It's not like the molecules got bigger and bigger. The parts are completely replaced. That parts are completely replaced. Actually, this morning during japa, it brought to life a metaphor. So chanting japa on my street, some of you know where I live. And Ramachandra Meena, you've rented a car. Right? You've rented a car. So I'm chanting. You got this red car on the street. It's like wonderful. So I go, and then the name of the model of the car is Soul. That's just brilliant. The Kia Soul, right? Something like that. Right. Yeah, it's brilliant. It brings to life the root cause of all human misery. It does. Stay with me on this. Okay.
Human misery.
Yeah, human
Your favorite topic.
it is like whatever the theme, I always go there. Okay, because the idea, again, it's like, okay, so yeah, let's say if I'm, so it's the same thing. Picture yourself on your phone. So let's say if I'm driving a Toyota, Harry Gopal and we drove here in a Toyota. So as we're driving in the Toyota, if we think, now we're Japanese. And let's say tomorrow we're in a Volkswagen. I think, now I'm German. The next day I get into a Renault. Now I'm French. And you say, look, no, David Wolf, that's just the car. Now that's just the car, where the car was made. You're the driver, you're not the car. Okay. So simply, we're not the body. We're that irreducible quanta of consciousness that animates the body. Call it the soul. Okay. But that's the whole thing. We're thinking the body, the car, is the soul. So now they've actually named a car soul, just to reinforce the core illusion that leads to beautiful stuff. Okay. So, all right. So generally, the difference between soul and body, that's considered the first philosophical precept in Bhagavad Gita. But Nimai, Nimai is a carpenter. And Nimai says to Professor Gresset, people in this community, they don't understand the first lesson of Bhagavad Gita. What do you mean? He said, no, the first lesson of Bhagavad Gita is feel your feelings and express them. Because before those series of 20 verses that we're talking about that are just about to start, we have Arjuna. Now, just for some context, Arjuna, he's the alpha warrior of the age. He is the alpha warrior of the age. And chapter 1 and chapter 2, these first 9 verses or so, he's there in the middle of the battlefield. The battle hasn't started yet. And Arjuna, he's experiencing very non-warrior-like feelings, sensations, and thoughts. He's feeling weak. He's crying. He's trembling in fear to the point he can't even hold his bow. And he's feeling all the soft. He's feeling very non-warrior-like. And he experiences that, and he communicates it. We can just imagine the level of courage, vulnerability, and in a sense, security in himself that's required. So for Arjuna to feel his feelings and express them, and his honesty there. So this is a core, this is a foundational principle of conscious communication everywhere. And it's illustrated here between Krishna and Arjuna. So that Arjuna was willing to, including here, because he's a warrior, he's like, the whole thing is set up for Arjuna to fight and destroy his enemies. He's like, right at the beginning of the battle, not going to fight. I'm scared. I'm sad. I'm confused, I'm weak. Right. So then that sets the stage, that unfold. And Krishna is say Krishna is the coach. He's the driver of the coach. And so Krishna is listening. Krishna is listening with empathy. He's hearing Arjuna. This is another principle. As a basic saying, people don't care what you know till they know that you care. Basic principle. Often a very effective way to show an effective way to show that we care is to suspend our judgment, suspend our advice, suspend our criticism, suspend our praise, and to cross the bridge from my world to the other person's world, and to show that I understand what you're saying and the feeling behind it. The Christian philosopher Paul Tillich said, the first duty of love is to listen. First duty of love is to listen. So Krishna is doing that. And understanding doesn't mean agreeing. Understanding doesn't mean agreeing. So Srila Rupa Goswami, he describes quality of relationship that is conducive for persons who are sincere about self-realization, spiritual life, God consciousness, developing love for God. In two of the items, he describes Guyam Akiti Prichati, which means to be dedicated to create a space, an environment in relationship where it's a safe space to reveal the heart and mind confidentially and to inquire confidentially. A safe space that if I reveal, especially those things that feel vulnerable, maybe my fears, my envy, my jealousy, my hurt, that I won't get crushed, I won't get trampled upon. It's a safe space to share confidentially. Again, not just for the sake of feeling one's feelings, to truly, because genuine spiritual life, it starts with sattva, which means genuine spiritual life starts with honesty about where I'm at, honesty about what's true for me. And then on that foundation of, yes, I'm acknowledging I got a lot of jealousy going on. I'm experiencing greed, I'm experiencing envy, I'm experiencing lust. Okay. Carl Jung said, till we make the unconscious conscious, it'll direct our life and we'll call it fate. So like, let's say if I got all sorts of resentment going, anger or shame, but I'm not willing to admit it even to myself because it doesn't look spiritual. Yeah. Well, then that bitterness, that anger, that shame, that's going to direct my life from beneath the conscious surface. And it can come out in all sorts of ways. So, okay. So now, again, people don't care what you know till they know that you care. So on the foundation of Arjuna, of course, Arjuna and Krishna, they're very trusting friends from before this conversation. One thing we can note in this one verse, there's several names. What do we have? We got two names of Arjuna, two names of Krishna. Names of Arjuna, Gudakesh and Parantapa. Names of Krishna, Rishikesh and Govinda. So one thing important here is that names are meaningful. Names are meaningful. You know, in more materialistic societies, just I've heard many, they'll just say like, man, I don't know, my parents just thought that same name now sounded nice. What's the meaning of the name? I don't know. We never even thought about it. So here names are meaningful. And we can see that Sanjaya is talking to someone named Dhritarashtra. To know all the names is not essential to get the essence of Bhagavad Gita. So He's using the name for Arjuna Parantapa. Parantapa means that he will defeat all his enemies. And Gudakesh means one who conquers over sleep, over ignorance. Krishna, Govinda, one who gives fulfillment to the senses, to all living entities, to the cows, to the land. And so on the basis of feeling understood, then we're more open to hear an alternate perspective. Arjuna presented his perspective, that led to him, I'm not going to fight this battle. Now, it's a bit, it's clear, but it's a bit complex, because we could think, oh, so Arjuna is very soft-hearted. He's very good qualities. He's very fine, compassionate qualities. And so he didn't want to fight the battle. At the same time, what Arjuna got is like, because that's a good thing to do. Let's be peaceful. Let's be peaceful. But actually, for Arjuna to not fight the battle, he went to go to the forest. Strangely, but that would have been arrogant. That would have been arrogant. Because Arjuna's role in society is what's called a kshatriya, to protect innocent people. And so the people were suffering because the government at the time, the rulers, they were being quite harsh and vicious and selfish and greedy. And so Arjuna, for himself, he didn't want, like, I'll control a kingdom and I'll be famous. For himself, he didn't care. At the same time, he said, for a higher purpose, to serve God and actually to serve people. So interestingly, Arjuna's spiritual process, and he got that by the end of Bhagavad Gita, was pick up his bow and fight bravely. And for Arjuna to go to the forest, that's so nice and peaceful. That would have been cowardly. That would have been cowardly. So it's interesting juxtaposition there. So Arjuna's calculations to not fight were based on the body. So Krishna comes in and gives, let's call it, an alternate perspective, that you're not the body, right? That you're the driver of the car. Not that the car is unimportant. Like, we're not suggesting to neglect the body, but just like an example we often use, let's say if we hear that there was a car crash, so we say, oh, did you get the insurance money? Is the car in the junkyard? Could you fix the tires? No. We say, was anyone injured? Did anyone die? Not when we hear, oh, there was no injuries, there's no deaths. Then we might inquire, oh, could you fix the car? But we know the driver of the car is a lot more important than the car. The driver of the car is a lot more important than the car. The car has its importance. We don't want to neglect it. And in fact, we want to know our car. The car takes us on a journey. We want to know, if the gas pedal is depressed half an inch, will it go like that, or will it hardly move? Is this a mini compact that can fit into tight parking spaces? Is this an 18-wheeler? I want to know my car. All cultivating realization, I'm not this car. I'm not this car. So Krishna's coming with that perspective. Krishna's coming with that perspective. And Krishna's, okay, now he's, another amongst many principles. And so it's become a common term these days, the spiritual bypass. Spiritual bypass. Right? The idea is, in the name of being spiritual, in the name of high philosophy, we become disconnected from very grounded principles of responsibility and effective communication, kindness, and like that. in the name of being spiritual. So cultivating, like even in real community, we can look, the word community and communication have the same root. So in real community, there won't be conflict or tensions. She laughs because she knows I'm speaking wrongly. There's going to be conflict because the fact that we're persons means there's going to be conflict. There's going to be tensions. It's fact. So then, genuine relationship, genuine community means that we cultivate the capacity through excellence in communication, that we don't sweep the conflicts under the rug, we don't pretend they're not there, we don't avoid the pain, but through excellence in communication, we transform conflict into closeness. So there's a text later in Bhagavad Gita. Anudvegam krambakyam satyam priyahinam chaya swadaya bhyasanam chaiva vanmayam tapu uchyate. So it's described. Austerity of speech consists in speaking truthfully and beneficially, and that our speech, that all the vibrations we make are aligned with deepening realization of the absolute truth. There's a conversation in January 1977 in Bombay. Now it's called Mumbai. And Prabhupada, he's like in his 80s at that time. And there's a young yogi named Yogi Amrit Desai who approaches Prabhupada. And Amrit Desai, he established the Kripalu Center for Yoga and Health. He established in Pennsylvania. Later, it moved to Massachusetts. Actually, in 2010, Kripalu invited us to conduct a Safito foundational seminar there. And we also conducted some mantra meditation. And Amrit Desai, he now has his ashram in Ocala. We've conducted workshops there too. Anyhow, at one point in the conversation, Amrit Desai, he says he's talking to Prabhupada about his guru. His guru's name is like Kripalu, I think is the name. And he describes his guru at one point in his life made a mauna vrat. Mauna vrat means a vow of silence. He made a mauna vrat for 12 years, vow of silence for 12 years. As soon as Amrit Desai said that, Prabhupada immediately said, "Oh, he didn't chant?" And then Amrit Desai said, "Oh, of course he chanted." So for me, it was a very moving conversation. It's recorded, it's transcribed. And because both of them immediately understood to chant the names of God in any language, to chant the names of God, any genuine names of God, that's not a violation of the vow of silence. That's the fulfillment of the vow of silence. The vow of silence means making a commitment. I'm not going to speak nonsense. I'm not going to speak any vibration that's just blah blah blah. Further entanglement in the gossip and the further entanglement in the illusory reflected banyan tree with vibration that actually moves us to the real fruit, the real banyan tree. In this chanting the name of God, it's described. It's described. See, in any tradition, Nam Namakri Bauda Nija Sarvashaktista Trabitanyamata Smarnik, Tat Nakala, Etadrishi Tavakripa Bhagavan Mamapi, Dordeva Midrashami Hajani Nanuraga. God has millions of names, and they're all fully invested with transcendental potency to cleanse our heart. Any tradition, the Islamic tradition, and my namesake, David Hamelech, right? What was he doing? What was he doing? I'll tell you, if we look at his pastimes, David Hamelech, King David, he was with his associates, dressed kind of like the Hare Krishna is dressed, just saying. He was with his associates, course, and he was in Jerusalem, and they were going, and they were just dancing in ecstasy, singing and chanting the names of God. Even the temple itself in the ancient Hebrew, it's actually called the temple of the holy name. That's actually the way it's said in Hebrew, the temple of the holy name. So he's in Jerusalem, chanting ecstatically. It's this kind. He was playing the tzitzilim, that's the cartels, tzitzilim, and trumpets and drums. Okay. It's the same in the Islam. So any genuine spiritual tradition, of course, there's so much corruption in the name of spiritual tradition, but any Jesus, hallowed be thy name. Of course, in Islam, they have the names of God. So it doesn't mean we can make up a name of God and chant that. Actually, my dissertation, my PhD dissertation is entitled Effects of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra on Stress, Depression, and the Three Gunas. And so one of the experiments we did, we had three groups. We had a Hare Krishna mantra chanting group. We had a control group, didn't chant anything. And we had a bogus mantra, a placebo. We told them it was a real mantra. It's deception in the name of science. I know. We told them it was a real mantra, but it was a placebo. And so the Hare Krishna chanting mantra group, they reduce their stress, reduce their depression, increase their life satisfaction with strong statistical significance compared to both of the other groups. Even in some early lecture, 66 or so, Prabhupada says, yeah, you can try it. You chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. He says, or you try chanting. You try chanting Coca-Cola, 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 Coca. But no one will survive chanting Coca-Cola for very long. Like that. But the point is, you try some other songs. Yeah, and so it's because we can think, well, just like some news on the radio or chanting Coca-Cola, it's the same thing as chanting Hare Krishna or chanting Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. It's the same thing. So that's kind of a theme here, right? There's mundane sound vibration, that's the reflection of the banyan tree, and there's spiritual transcendental sound vibration, the real banyan tree. So there's the reflected communication, which just implicates us further and further in the illusion. And there's the real banyan tree. There's spiritual communication, spiritual sound vibration that moves the self, realize who we are as the driver of the car, and realize who we are as servants of God. And so Krishna's so it's just got assertive communication is aligned with the absolute truth, and it's beneficial and true, and it's called sattvic communication. It's called the austerity of speech. I find that a perfect term because I know myself. When I allow myself to be influenced by the lower modes of nature, then let's say I got something going on, some bitterness, some resentment, some withheld energy. I'm really irritated. I think, I don't want to rock the boat. And I'll just, I won't say anything. As the saying goes. As the saying goes, if we're only willing to do what's easy, life will be hard. If we're ready to do what's hard, life will be easy. So in terms of communication or speech, so, okay, it can be easy, just not say anything. But then life is hard because then I'm not in my integrity. I know I'm letting deception, I'm letting my boundaries be violated or like that. I'm not in my integrity. Life is very hard. Right? So then also it can be relatively, it's like, okay, I got something to say. Here it is. Here's the truth in your face. I can just blurt it out. Blah, there, see if you can handle it. That can also be relatively easy. Kind of taking my anger and just less than consciously polluting the atmosphere with my uncontrolled anger. So austerity of speech is where we have the courage to speak truth. And at the same time, we have the consideration and empathy and sensitivity to communicate the truth in a way where I'm truly endeavoring to be beneficial. Even if I might be saying something that might not be pleasant, I'm not being unpleasant. I'm not being obnoxious. I'm not being arrogant. I'm that simultaneously courageous and considerate, and that it might be uncomfortable to hear at the same time, like kind of, I'm doing my 100% best, that you get that even though I'm sharing something, it might be uncomfortable. You get that I'm caring about you and about our relationship enough to be honest. And it's aligned with, when I say, I'm using this term absolute truth just to define that a bit, because absolute can mean like, what does that mean? It's closed-minded. No, it just no. This Bhagavad Gita encourages open-mindedness and open-minded search for objective truth. Objective truth. Okay. Absolute means that which is true in all time and space. So if I say, I'm David Wolf, I'm 63 years old from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So was I David Wolf from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania 1,000,000,000 years ago? Will I be David Wolf from Philadelphia 1,000,000,000 years from now? No. So that's relative truth based on this body. And even that time span of hundreds of trillions of years, even that's not even an eye blink compared to the timeless eternal life of the irreducible quant of consciousness that is the actual soul. The car is not the soul, whatever they might want to name the brand. So absolute truth, I'm not the body. I'm spirit soul. I'm eternal servant of God. That's true in all time and space. That's the truth that we're seeking. And so so on the basis of the trust Krishna creates with Arjuna, by listening and by being present and creating a sacred space for communication, then Krishna is assertively speaking the truth, absolute truth, and he's doing that. He's doing that such that Arjuna gets, this is a real friend. For me, this is a way to define true friendship, true love. I mean, we can think of love as like a sentimental feeling that could have its place. We say true love often means I care enough about you and about our relationship to not care whether you like me. Not that I'm just trying to provoke you, to agitate you. At the same time, like I care enough about us and about you to not reinforce the illusions, So it's described. De nityam avadriyam de sarvasya de bharata. Not tasmad sarvani bhutani not tvam shochi tumarhasi. That the soul is eternal, is deathless. The body will definitely die. And so, well, to be a little more precise, I like to go here. To be a little more precise, the body is already dead. I mean, don't mean to be morbid or depressing, but just like, let's take the car analogy, right? Let's say if there's some aliens from the galaxy Andromeda, and they visit the Earth sphere, and they might look from a distance, and they might think, there's these living entities on Earth called Dodge and Chrysler and Mercedes-Benz and BMW. There's this whole society of these living entities, and sometimes there's these other living entities who are parasites called humans, and they get in and they suck the blood. But that's not the case. No. So actually, the cars, the Kias and the Hondas and the Toyotas, they're dead, and they only appear alive because the driver's inside. So similarly, the body, like the car is made of rubber, plastic, metal. It's dead stuff. it appears alive when the driver's inside. Similarly, the body's already dead, but it appears alive because we're inside. And when spirit soul leaves, okay, then just bury it, burn it, throw it into the ocean like that. Right. So it's recommended to utilize to utilize our facility to communication to support self-realization, support realizing we're not the car, we're the driver of the car. Then what's the natural function of the driver of the car? To like, okay, we spend so much time, energy, education. What's it mean to take care of the car, the body, to eat, to feed, have sex life, and defend it? And that shouldn't be neglected. We don't want to neglect the car. At the same time, what's it mean to nurture the atomic unit of sentience that's the driver of the car? And so that's what Bhagavad Gita is about, and that's what transformative communication is about. And so I thank you for listening. Thank you for giving your attention to this transcendental philosophy. I'll stop here, and I welcome at this point if anyone has any comments or questions you'd like to share or ask, any realizations you'd like to express or questions. Hare Krishna. Any questions or comments? Devin.
Well, yeah. So right from the beginning, I've had this question. I've been trying to solve it myself. I have some thought. And you said something about love.
Yeah. Love means two.
It's two.
Yeah.
It means two. And it's, I think, a voluntary service.
Yeah.
You just defined between two, I think you said entities or
yeah. Two conscious entities.
Two conscious entities.
Yeah, two conscious entities.
And then I kind of was like in the question, well, what is self-love?
Yeah.
What am I doing if I'm like working on, I think if this is what I do, I'm working on self-love, this critic, what is that? And then if I'm giving love, okay, if I'm the soul, I'm so this is sort of how I'm trying to figure this out. So that I'm the soul, I'm not the car, the body's dead.
Right.
Okay, then am I giving me, the soul, if I'm giving self-love, say to the body, like I do the yoga, so my body's not stiff. I think that's self-love. I'm loving my body or something. Or like, dieting, eating, taking care. She said not to neglect the body. It's like, so is it just a misnomer kind of the term self-love in that way? Like, what do you tell me?
Thank you, Devin. I appreciate your question. Yeah, it is kind of a door I briefly opened at the beginning of class, and I didn't really go into it much. So I appreciate your going there and your question. Srila Prabhupada talks about self-love, and Prabhupada says it's natural to love ourselves. It's not like, oh, this self-love, that's just there's a difference between self-care and self-absorption. So, because there can be a misconception of self-love means you're not serving others. So Prabhupada, it's natural to serve ourselves, to love ourselves. So Prabhupada says, okay, so we love our body. I mean, apart from how spiritually realized we're supposed to be, we all love our body. And this body, we identify with it. So Prabhupada says, so how come we love our body? And he says, because the soul's inside. Okay. Once the soul leaves, bury it, burn it, feed it to the fish. Right? So we love our body because the soul's inside. So how come we love the soul? Said because the soul is part and parcel of Krishna. So Krishna, it's Krishna in the form of Paramatma is the soul of the soul. It is the soul of the soul. So it's very natural to take care of our body and to love ourselves. Nityasiddha Krishna Prema Sajika Bhunoy Shavanadi Shuddhachite Karye Udai. Love for Krishna is eternally situated in the hearts of all living entities. It's not something that needs to be gotten from some external contrived source. And that love for Krishna, love for self, is actually naturally awakened through the process of hearing and chanting the names of Krishna, the names of God. So, right. So, so first of all, I say, I'm not the body. This is my body. I'm the soul. C.S. Lewis said, We don't have a soul. We are a soul. We have a body. So it's Bhagavad Gita. But then even more than that, realizing not even to say it's my body, be true either. I'm renting. I'm renting. I'm not, this is actually Krishna's body. And let me use it. Let me use it in God's service. This is God's body. And I get to choose to use it in God's service. So sure, self-love is natural. Now, how are we going to manifest that? And we can manifest self. Yeah, it does become a farce. It just becomes some false cliche when in the name of self-love, I'm actually doing damage to myself. To actually act in self-love, which is natural, to actually act in self-love means what's my actual self-interest? What's my highest self-interest? Not just okay, let's say just in an ordinary, let's say an analogy. Let's say we see someone, a homeless person on the street or ourselves. And he goes like, oh, do you have no love for me? Can you give me a cigarette? Oh yes, I love this person. I'll give a cigarette. Maybe let's say if I have an urge to have a cigarette because I love that's all based on the illusion that I am I'm degrading myself in the name of self-love. We can give different analogies, but we know in the name of serving myself, I'm actually degrading myself with my overeating or what we're doing on the internet. Okay. So what is this self? You laughed on that one. Yeah. So she laughed first. So what is this self that we're endeavoring to love? Right? So is the self is this belly, the self is these genitals, the self is this mind that thinks I'm the car, that thinks I'm David Wolf from Philadelphia. So to the extent that we get, oh, I'm spirit soul, to really love myself means I feed the soul. So what's it mean to feed the soul? Okay, then we get that's the whole point of Bhagavad Gita. So self-love is natural. How to actually love ourselves in a way that takes us to the real love, the real banyan tree, not just the reflection. Thank you, Devin. I'll just expand slightly more on that because there are some philosophies where the goal of enlightenment is to realize we're all one. To realize, like it's called radical non-dualism. That there's in the ultimate enlightenment, there's no differentiation. And once we go there, then there's no talk of love. Love means a voluntary exchange of service and affection between two conscious entities. So it's all one. So that's the thing. Like in self-love, we get like, oh, okay, let me direct my propensity for love and service towards a supreme conscious entity. So there are two. Thank you. Yes.
What is the role of suffering that can generate sincerity for soul, and then from that sincerity, like a eternal linking or connection with Krishna or God?
Thank you, sir. What's your name, if you want to share? If you want to say.
No, I don't know.
Okay, Prinata. Well, I appreciate your intelligent philosophical question. What's the role of suffering to move us to that eternal link? Yeah, thanks for that. All right, so there's we can use the prison analogy. I borrow these analogies from A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. So, just like ideally, the purpose of a prison is not just like sadistic punishment. Purpose of the prison, yeah, your freedom is restrained because you violated others' rights and you didn't follow the laws and you hurt people. So now you go to prison. Now the prison is still it's a department of the government. Ideally, the goal of the prison is like, yeah, there's punishment, there's suffering, but the ideal is to support the inmates to transform their hearts. Yeah, it's really suffering here down behind these bars, and I can't visit my children like that. Okay, so to transform their hearts, let me, let me serve the king according to the king's law, also serve the government. And then it's not just be obedient, but then because then when the prisoners transform, okay, now you're qualified because your criminal mentality has been transformed. Now you're qualified to go out into the society, the community, and contribute to society, help others be happy, and you'll be happy yourself, rather than breaking into their houses and stealing things and committing murder. So this material world, in your question, I'm reminded of a book by M. Scott Peck. He was a psychiatrist in the 1970s. Very, very spiritual. He's a Christian background, and his book is called The Road Less Traveled. Became a famous book in the area of spiritual personal development. He starts his book with the short sentence, "Life is difficult." Life is difficult. And he goes, once we accept that, okay, then it doesn't matter that life is difficult. And what he's saying, as far as I understand, once we accept it, but the prison house is like, it's a difficult place. There are disturbances. So Bhagavad Gita also, Krishna says, that this whole world, the whole reflected banyan tree, it's one disturbance after the other, sometimes very severe, sometimes quite agonizing suffering. We've all experienced it, maybe from other people, maybe our own mind, maybe our health. Okay. So life is difficult. So Scott Peck and Bhagavad Gita. So once we get it, then the goal is no longer to just try to fix the difficulties. Then we get to dedicate ourselves to the higher principles of life, that eternal happiness that's there in self-realization and service to God. And that's the idea of the suffering in the prison, not just because the guards are sadistic. The idea is like, let that move me. Let that move me to deep determination and inspiration to use my life to serve the king according to his laws, to realize who I am as the driver of the car and to serve Krishna with love and devotion. Then even those difficulties and the suffering, they become an impetus to even greater joy, because that moves me to realize the intrinsic futility trying to be happy in material life, and moves me to deeper inspiration to bhakti yoga. That's what this process is called. Actually, the whole material world, it's called Durga. The Sanskrit meaning of Durga is prison house. And the warden of the prison house is a woman. She's a demigoddess. Her name is Durga. And just like, again, she's not like this like bad person. She's a pure devotee of God. And she has what can be a somewhat thankless task of managing us. It's described. Srishti stiti pralaya sadhana shakti reka chayvyasya bhuvanani biparti durga itanu upamapiyasya chacheshtate sa govinda mari pusham tamaham bhajami. So Durga, she's also known as Kali, she's also known as Parvati. Her job for the king is to manage the prison house. And that's suffering. But ultimately, when a prisoner is completely rehabilitated, I just want to live purely, then she's very happy. She offers them a garland. And then there are tests along the way, because we might give ourselves to self-realization, some bhakti yoga, some devotional service. And this bhakti yoga, sure, that's a Sanskrit term, that's the essential goal of all genuine spiritual or religious process. We can say, it's like we have our Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, the mantra that when Jesus was asked, what's the most important text in the Old Testament? He responded, love God with all your heart, all your soul, all your might. Ve'lebenecha b'dibar tambam. And this is the most important thing to teach your children. Most important thing. Love God. That's bhakti. And he goes on. And to be, what is it? Bininaim, to mark that. He says, mark this commandment on your forehead. I'm not making that up. That's there. That's there. Mark it on your forehead. Okay, so the Jews have the tefillin. You got tilak, and there's a thing to not shave the corner, pina, singular, of your head. And we can go on and on with this stuff. So that's, to cultivate that consciousness where I respond to pain and suffering when things don't go the way I want in life, respond to it with deeper enthusiasm, to serve God with love and devotion. That's enlightenment. That's the ultimate purpose of the pain and suffering. There's a text in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam that essentially says that. Tate nukampam susamikshamano bunjane vatma kritam vipakam vidvag papurpir vidadan namaste jivetayu mukti pade sadayam. That, a living entity who, when there's reverses, things aren't gone their way in whatever, whether it's finances, relationships, we just take that spontaneously as impetus to deepen my enthusiasm to serve Krishna with sincerity, then that's the liberated position. Thanks for your question. Follow up. Yeah.
So say that so suffering that creates sincerity and more and increased devotion, you could say is Krishna's mercy.
Yeah.
But what about like suffering that doesn't like generate sincerity? Like what if it's, or I guess maybe suffering over time will generate sincerity, but what is like suffering just that doesn't really generate that? That's not really would you say that's coming from Krishna also, or that's Krishna's mercy also, but it's just will take longer to create sincerity, or what would you say about that?
I appreciate the follow-up. Yeah. So what we can say, suffering that doesn't generate that sincerity for your life, that's Maya's mercy. Okay. Krishna is also a servant of Maya. So another way to look at it is it's all Krishna's mercy, but when it generates sincerity, it means we're open to receive the mercy. Just like, let's say, the sun is shining brightly, and I can be outside getting it, or I can be in a closet under some covers with my eyes closed, and go, why doesn't the sun shine brightly? The sun's out. You need to go out. The sun's right there. You're actively hiding from it. So it's all Krishna's mercy. And Krishna's never forcing us to open and receive the mercy. Just like Krishna speaks the entire Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. And then right towards the closure, he says to Arjuna, Vimrishya yeta rasheshena yate chasi tatakuru. He says, now Arjuna, do as you wish to do. It relates to the love question. No force, no coercion, no pressure. Krishna is not saying, I don't care what you do. Krishna wants Arjuna to choose wisely in self-love, but no force. So Krishna is giving us mercy, whether it's through things going well or things going up. It's always Krishna's mercy. And to what extent are we embracing that lifeline? To what extent are we turning away from the sun? I appreciate your questions.
You say Maya is a servant of Krishna, or Krishna is a servant of Maya?
Maya is a servant of Krishna. Durga. Garuda, you had a question?
Hare Krishna, thank you for the class. Yeah, I guess I have a kind of comment or just my own experience of both.
Just make sure they can hear you online.
Okay. And so I have kind of comments or questions. I guess I'll go to the suffering and first, because that was the most recent. And yeah, I was just looking at my own experience of suffering, and then also going into like looking at like how people overcome suffering, and looking at this idea of mercy,
Yeah,
and also as a gift,
yeah,
like the suffering that we go through is a gift, and like without that perspective, how that suffering can really take over an individual.
mm,
And for my own self, like being given a new perspective that the suffering in my life is mercy, or potentially this gift, or is a gift,
yeah,
help me kind of get unstuck and start to like be open to the possibility that there's a reason why I went through suffering, or that people go through suffering.
yeah.
So I was just kind of looking at that in regards to the suffering topic, just looking at like having that knowledge or that perspective,
Mm.
and how supportive that can be to start to see the reason or gifts in the suffering. That was my own personal experience.
I appreciate hearing your experience and your personal process around that principle.
Yeah, yeah, and the first topic around self-love, I feel like it's related to the suffering as well, for me personally, just looking at like this idea of what you know individuals like myself, or associating with individuals in personal growth groups or therapy,
Yeah,
where we're endeavoring to love ourselves, but are we endeavoring to love the character, and that's all our
Mm.
perspective is the character of Gaetano, the character. And what we're speaking to is that there's the self that's beyond the character, and there's like just an abundant, like never ending amount of love there.
yeah,
So if we were to be able to connect to the authentic like self, then this whole idea of trying to love, it's like you would just be
yeah,
overcome by the love
yeah.
of the self. So I'm just kind of looking at like, whoa, like how do we like, I mean, I have some idea, but I'm just kind of in that question. How do we completely break free from that like perspective, or that false ego
Yeah.
of the self, to where all we're experiencing is that like fullness and love and connection? I guess that's kind of, thank you.
Thanks for your sharing, your comments, your personal experiences, and your question. It's one of those how-to questions.
Just tell me.
Right. Well, the response is everything, which hope hope that's not too vague. Everything meaning like everything Prabhupada gives us in the process of bhakti yoga, from discussions on Bhagavad Gita, reading, morning program, the regulative principles of freedom, and that each day, to the extent that I give myself to this process with sincere heart, then I get, maybe another fraction of a percent realization that I'm not this David Wolf character, that I'm a spirit soul. Hearing your sharing, I'm reminded in some, because there's a lot of Vaishnav holidays these times. We're reading a lot from Chaitanya Charitamrita, authored transpersonal authorship by Krishnas Kaviraj Goswami. So he has one verse in the 5th chapter of the Adi Leela. In the verse, essentially he says, I am more sinful than Jagai and Madai. I am lower than the worm in stool. That is self-esteem. Okay. So he said, oh, he needs some self-esteem seminars or like that. So it's an important distinction, because I like how you said, because to the extent that I'm disconnected from realizing, not just understanding, but realizing who I am as that blissful spirit soul, servant of Krishna, then I can do this therapy, that seminar, this and that. And I'm not against seminars, right? But like this Krishna's or Srila Prabhupada, when he's on the Jaladuta at Boston Harbor, right, 1965, in some of his poetry, he's praying to Bhaktisiddhanta, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, and to Krishna. He's saying, I have no knowledge, I have no devotion. He's not just trying to make a show of humility. He's really feeling he has no knowledge, no devotion. Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami is feeling he's lower than the worm and stool. So, well, he's really feeling low. He needs more pride in himself. No, but we can see, again, it's the reflected banyan tree or the real banyan tree. We talked about communication. Here we're talking about emotion. So if that feeling low emotion, in Prabhupada's case, that moved him to even deeper determination to spread Krishna consciousness and love of God around the world. And because of that emotion, that's why we're here in La Crosse, Florida, discussing Bhagavad Gita. Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami, that humble, low emotion, that moved him to inspiration. Even though he was in his 90s, he had arthritis, couldn't write, but it moved him to reveal the spiritual epic Chaitanya Charitamrita. So that's like with any emotion, guilt, happiness, shame, feeling anger, there's spiritual anger. To what extent is it moving us to alienation of the self? And to what extent is it moving us to deeper enthusiasm for self-realization and service to Prabhupada and Prabhupada's mission? And so yeah, that I like how you said the character. So to the extent that we follow the process with sincerity, we whittle away that false identification that I am this machine, the body, and the designations connected with the machine. And the more we realize who we are as that blissful spirit soul. Thank you. Damayanti.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
I had a realization while listening. Like I know, and before I say what it is, I was just thinking like how we just forget. Like I've heard reasonable principles even before hearing about bhakti yoga, like reasonable things, but we completely forget about living off of those like higher principles. And then like it's nice to associate with people who are talking about higher principles and living from higher principles. The more we associate with people of a higher vibration or this, I'm just thinking just like kind of practically.
Yeah.
The more we associate with people who
Association, yeah.
The association is helping us remember like, oh yeah, that's my values. That's how I want to act. That's how I want to be in this world. So the association is really helpful to remember how we actually want to be in this world. That's just a practical thing that I realized because I'm happy to share the realization too. And it was it's not like a really heavy topic or private. I'm not even going to say the actual topic, but it's between my husband and I. I'm just sharing personally, and I'm not going to get into the issue, but just I want him to realize something.
Yeah.
So, but like this is, I think we can handle this. I'm not going to go into it. Like I want him to realize something. And my approach is not conscious. I'm not doing conscious communication.
Yeah.
I'm attached to an outcome. And I think that the outcome I want is based in something good. Like, I think I actually do have a reasonable perspective. Yeah. But the way I'm communicating is not very effective because one thing is I have like this intensity of like pressure or attachment or like convincing energy and to get him to realize what I want, what I'm thinking. And it's a good idea. It's not a bad idea, but yeah, like
Probably the right idea. I'm a loving parent play.
Yeah.
no, it's not coming from a loving and caring place. It's like this attachment, and that's what I'm coming from is fear, because I am experiencing fear. I'm wanting to control an outcome, and I'm hoping, and I feel powerless, and I think that he has to have the realization in order to get the experience that I think is good, and I'm coming from a fearful place, and
So it's a lot about you.
yeah, well,
And he can feel your attachment.
yes, exactly. And so I've been like, had this like, I felt like, oh, like I reconnected with higher principles during the class. And I thought, oh, like, first of all, what's happening inside of me? And how can I'm kind of yelling now. Those outside walls. Yeah, no, it's cute. It's cute. So first of all, like what's happened? So I can communicate more clearly. Where first of all, getting in touch with myself, and I want them to have for that. Yeah, so I thought, oh, let me find out what's really going on inside of me, communicate more effectively, like I'm experiencing fear, or like like a request, or I could just communicate. I could use more communication skills. And then anyway, this might not be very spiritual, it's just a practical thing. But then I thought also I could after getting in touch with myself and getting more clear and communicating my side of the street, like what's inside of me, then I could even listen better to my husband, and probably even have more of an outcome that I want if I were to choose all the like like a healthy, conscious communication approach. And if I don't get what I want in the result of him realizing, getting on the same page as me or whatever, I can at least be in integrity. Like I can at least be in integrity with how I acted. And like, who am I to control someone and control outcomes? Like I don't know the story. I'm playing a role in the grand scheme of things. And I'm playing the role of wife, and
You could be more in that, not to imitate Krishna, but to be in that spirit. Like you express yourself, and then do as you wish to do with caring, non-attachment.
Yeah, like I could be attached and just be like, okay, life is going to unfold how it's going to unfold. And who am I to say that it should be the way that I think it should be? I might be wrong. I mean, I might not have it all calculated accurate. So anyway, I felt like, oh wow, like I could be free. I could be free from my attachment and fear, and also just the tension and pressure in the relationship on that one topic. With living from higher principle. So anyway, I just thought I'd share personal.
Thank you, Damayanti. Thanks for sharing. And I appreciate you that in this conversation, you're getting some liberating realization. In a sense, nothing new. At the same time, you're freshly connecting with realization. Bhagavad Gita applied in your relationship with your husband. And I appreciate what you emphasize. Association, just like we talked about some key principles. We're not the body, we're spirit, soul, service to God. And the key principle is the Sangha. Like that's why you and your husband for like really like a decade now, you're regularly opening your home for these. Just starting 2014 was your first one. You're regularly opening your home to association like this, association that's dedicated, to go into the metaphor, to let's embrace the real banyan tree and dedicated to self-realization and Krishna consciousness. And that's an austerity, and that's what you're dedicating your family life to. So here in La Crosse, and I host programs at my place and other members of the community. So we welcome everyone to this association where we're endeavoring to cultivate mastery in a communication-based approach to self-realization and Krishna consciousness. And yeah, I thank you that you're so steady in this service. Thank you, Gaetanu and Damayanti and Garuda. Hare Krishna. Bhagavad Gita ki. Srila Prabhupada ki. Hare Krishna. What's next? Kirtan?
What's next is another kirtan. We'll do standing kirtan. Would you like to lead?
Kirtan and then Prashad.
Maybe to go up higher.
That's good. That's a good idea.
The dancing feet are always nice, but smiling faces.
Sure, good point. Good thing.
Hare Krishna.
You guys going to get excited.
It's so modest too. So modest.
Nam Vishnu Padaya, Vishnu Kristaya, Okay, Bhaktivedanta Swami Namaste, Sampler Living Airlines, returning the invitation. Sunya Bari Paschatya Jason Karni Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Vedanta Shri Vars Govinda. Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Krishna